welcome back to the Halfie Project podcast. My name is Becky. This is Cedric Cedric, and you're tuned in for another excellent episode. That was wild. I like how I've just assumed these episodes will be excellent.
That's what I thought about the last episode because you said it before
this
we
This is a great episode, but we don't know how it's going to turn out. This is going to be the best episode we've ever had to date.
What is our best episode?
I don't know. We've had a lot of good ones, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked Han.
Right.
That you get when the small person has been stepped on. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
It's kind of all of those things together.
I honestly like the hip hop episode. There would be none of that without my people.
Yeah.
Because we did so much. We did
that was fun to research.
Hours and hours of research for that.
And I like the Mongolian blue spot.
Is actually a sign that you have a bit of the sky in you because all Mongolian children are part of this great country, this great big blue sky country.
Mm-hmm. The blue butt.
And it was cool because so many people left comments or sent messages of being like, oh, I had the blue spot, or my kid had the blue spot and the nurses had no idea what it was, and all of these things. It surprised me how widely spread it is, and two, how so few people knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty cool. If you were born with the Mongolian blue spot, that might give reason for people around you to be jealous of you.
Trying hard for that transition there.
I don't know how to take this transition.
Let's just do a rough transition. Okay. And I don't know about the...
We're basically talking about the comments that we often hear, sometimes directed to us, sometimes directed to other mixed Koreans, where a Korean person might say, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다, 부럽다. Like, oh, it's so cool that you're half Korean. I wish I was half Korean. I'm so jealous. Like these kind of statements or comments that we might hear. And also other comments that we will get for people who dismiss our experiences with the statement, oh, Koreans are just jealous of you. Get over it. Koreans are just jealous of you, so you should just consider yourself lucky. So why do you even talk about the negative things? They're just jealous, right? So we're talking about these bundle of statements that we have heard, maybe to us or directed to others.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you hear that?
A lot.
Yeah?
Yeah, I hear it a lot. But I have heard people say a lot of times like, oh, I'm so jealous because you had an American father and a Korean mother, so you got the best of both worlds. Or I'll hear like, oh, 좋겠다, 영어 잘해서, like you're so good at English, so I'm so jealous. Which, I mean, I guess that really would make sense. But how often do you hear that statement?
I wouldn't say it's like an everyday thing, but every once in a while in certain contexts, yeah, like whenever I would do certain like commercial shoots.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's like the makeup person or the hair person,
yes,
right?
Yes, I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah, it's like I've noticed that they've said that to me.
Yeah.
Oh, you're half black and Korean, and you know that means you're I don't know, you have the Korean genes, but you could play ball or something. You know what I mean? Something kind of vague,
right?
And stereotypical.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would receive those comments really throughout my life, or you know, sometimes on the flip side, a lot of times, and we've talked about this before, but like. Black people would say, oh, you got that good hair because you're, you know, half Korean or half Asian. So I'm sort of used to getting these comments to the point where I definitely don't let it get to my head. You know, it's just like, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I've heard it before, and I guess I see why you're saying it. But in the context of like in Korea, I don't know, it feels a little different though when Korean people say that. And I don't know how to, feel about it.
I agree. I think, so when I first came to, well, not the first time, but the first time I was starting to acknowledge these statements during university, and people would say like, oh my gosh, you're half Korean, 좋겠다. Like 좋겠다 it's not really I'm so jealous. It's more like, oh, must be nice. Like, oh,
right.
That's so cool, right? Kind of this kind of 느낌, right? This feeling. And so the first times that I was starting to acknowledge this statement, I would feel very conflicted because half of me wants to be like, oh, no, you know, like it's not a great, yeah, it's whatever, like really want to downplay it, right? Should I be like, oh yeah, I know it's so great, right? Should I play it up, or should I completely pretend I didn't hear you? Like it put me in a kind of odd spot because in a way, it is just a surface comment that's just like, oh, it's so nice, but you don't know what they're saying. Oh, it's so nice too. Are they saying it's so nice because they think you can speak English well, which is not true for all half Koreans? Or are they saying it because they think half Koreans are gorgeous, which unfortunately is not true, for all half Koreans.
But all of you listeners, you are
But
all
you guys,
gorgeous.
we're not talking about you listeners. We're obviously talking about different people. People, or they think it's because you have had whatever other culture that you also grew up with or other country you may have grown up in, they think it's better living there as opposed to living in Korea. Don't really know what they're trying to intimate there.
Right. I mean, I guess it's different for everyone. Like, when they say that, in their mind, they're probably thinking one of those things or a combination of those things, I think. Yeah.
And I don't think even they might know clearly what they're trying to tell you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but the question I have for you then is, do you feel like you're a little over getting that question? Like it's annoying, not question, but it's annoying to get that comment.
I don't think it's annoying. It would be a little bit different. It's different when people are poking at you and be like, oh, well, why is that? Or why is this? Or oh my gosh, or how come you're Korean? Or blah, blah, blah. Right? That's annoying because then it requires me to make an active response. But when I hear this kind of phrase like, oh, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다. So like lucky you're Korean or half Korean. Then when I hear that, I feel more often than not, they're just kind of saying it. It's just like throwing it out of some internal subconscious feeling or emotion or thought they might have about it. And I'm not really required to carry on this conversation. You see what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't want to look at it and be like, yes, it is great being half Korean and let me tell you why.
Right.
I don't feel obligated. Sometimes when people say like, oh, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다, when they say, I'm like, yes, thank you, mom and dad, for your DNA. And they're like, ha 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 ha. But I mean, it's true. I think it also comes down to, on one hand, how serious are you thinking about it? Versus the other hand, where it's just like, it's just like 그냥 한 말이지, like just something you say, and you just kind of blow past it. If you're taking it more seriously, which I guess we'll do right now to break it down. So you might hear this phrase and you feel a little bit confused or a little bit like, yeah, good or bad, and let me tell you why. There's that feeling that might come, a little bit kind of vague, conflicting feelings you might get from it. Or if you want to think a little bit deeper, how hypocritical this statement can also come out as. Yeah.
When you realize, well, as a half Korean, am I really accepted, by you and by the Korean people? So that's part of the hypocrisy. They're like, oh, I want you, they're kind of saying, reading between the lines, oh, I wish I had your life, or I wish I was half Korean and had like that experience that you have. But really, do you really want to know what kind of experience that I have as a half Korean? So I think that is one aspect of it that, at least that I think about.
Of course. I mean, okay, so we bring it to commercial shoots, or if you're doing something where there's a group of people working together and you're spending a long period of time with these people. So there will be cases where I'll be in this kind of group function and someone will see me, oh my gosh, you're half Korean. Oh, 좋겠다. Oh, you're so lucky. And that's your first interaction with them. And you're like, okay, ha ha ha. And then you move on. But then during lunchtime, do they want to sit with you and talk to you? No. During lunchtime, they ask you, oh, do you eat kimchi? Can you eat kimchi?
Oh, right.
It's like, okay. So they say, oh, you're so fortunate. And, oh, I wish I had that too. But the rest of the actions or the rest of the statements or the rest of whatever's happening in this group function is indicating, yeah, but you're not one of us. So it's kind of like, do you really like that I'm half Korean? Do you really wish you were half Korean? So in that case, you can see, oh, well, there's kind of double side happening here. So that's why the phrase itself can just sound kind of hollow, right? Because you're like, oh, 좋겠다, I'm so fortunate. Oh, I wish I had that. I wish I looked like you. I wish this. But the rest of the time is like, oh, well, you don't really plug in well with us. And we're not going to make an effort to accommodate you.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I wonder, like, built in that phrase when they say it, like, is it just all the vain aspects of being like half Korean or having two different cultures? Is it that they're saying they're jealous of? Like the fact that maybe, because, a lot of Korean people, from my understanding and experience, like they might look at someone who is half Korean and feel a little bit physically inferior in terms of, wow, they are beautiful. You know, they're half white and Korean. They have, you know, the best of the best, right? Or if they're half black and Korean, wow, they have such beautiful hair and like tan skin, but like they just look so beautiful, right? So that's really a vain metric of like who a person is, right? Or are they jealous of the fact that maybe, you know, half Korean can speak 2 languages or have the opportunity to do that? Or are they jealous of the fact that they grew up in America and, you know, as a Korean, they probably aren't really, like, they know they're trapped in this sort of like Korean framework in society, and it's
maybe someone who wants to break out of
exactly.
that.
It's like, a lot less flexible than, say, out in the West, you know, as far as opportunities and how people think.
Out in the West, you made it sound like we live like with the wild West.
So I think a lot of times maybe those are the aspects that they're really saying without knowing that they're saying it. It's like, oh, you have the beauty and you have the cultural experiences and the language. It must be nice because I don't have that, or I don't find myself to be like in Korea. It's a very homogenous society. So everyone sort of more or less looks very similar. They don't stand out in that way. And so even though you have a hierarchy of beauty standards in Korea, like to be half Korean, like they might look at them and say, wow, they have beautiful Korean features, and then they have like amazing Western features, and that's like a double slam dunk.
Yeah, slam dunk. Good for me. No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, because a lot of Korean people are very insecure about how they look, and that's a lot of that has to do with how the expectations in society are.
Well, it's very apparent when we see what's pushed on every subway line with these huge posters of these girls who have gotten plastic surgery, and a lot of them are trying to, through surgical methods, mimic what they consider as the beautiful Western features.
Yeah. Right. But when you're mixed, you don't have to have no surgery. You're just that.
But I mean, think about it though. What we have fallen in this conversation already into the fallacy of assuming what a mixed Korean might look like. A lot of in the mind of Korean people who are assuming a beautiful mixed Korean, it is someone most likely than not who is white and Korean. And obviously that look of white and Korean is very different than someone who is, say, Korean and Chinese, Korean and Japanese, Korean and, you know, Indian.
That is true.
Right. So by using that statement like, oh, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다 because you have those beautiful features that we all want, we already fell into that group think of, but that's someone who's white and Korean because that's the beautiful mixed person. Why do you look so insecure?
I don't look, no, I'm
I know, when it comes to talking about image and all of that, right?
Yeah.
But I think it is true that there is a sort of obsession with having that Eurasian, white, Korean, mixed Korean look. And so when someone says, oh, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다, I do have to wonder if I myself, let's say I was, Nepalese and Korean. Let's say that I was half Nepalese and half Korean. And then I was just kind of like, hey guys, I'm half Korean. I wonder how many people would look at me and say, oh, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다. I really have to wonder because 1, it's not coming from a Western society. 2, I'm not getting a benefit of speaking English, which is obviously a highly desired skill in Korea. And 3, I also wouldn't be half white. So that phrase, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다, like, I think what you're trying to say is because you're half white and also you have the English and the Western side to you, 그거는 좋겠다.
Right.
That one, I
feel
so
like
lucky.
the Western component is very big because I know, at least for me, because since I do get those comments, I think it comes from a place of they know that I'm also, you know, one of my parents is American. So I've had that upbringing. So I think that is a good point because, you know, within Korean society, there is a way of looking at America or Western countries much higher than Southeast Asian countries or other places in the world. And so I think that does play a part in this subconscious statement whenever they say that, you know? So yeah, I think for me, even though I'm black and Korean and I'm not, you know, I guess black people are not considered high up compared to white people in the minds of a lot of Korean people. I think the fact that I am from America And also the fact that they might think that, oh, he has a great personality, he looks good, whatever.
Sorry. He has a great personality.
Okay, it comes across a little like
you have a great personality.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know what you're saying.
That's why they're able to say that comment to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you were really rude, no one would be like, "Oh, I wish I was him." I know what you mean.
Y'all can't see me blushing right now.
You are blushing. Wow, you're really hot. I know.
I don't think I'm
You look
like...
at yourself every morning. You're like, "나여서 좋겠다." I'm kidding. We're the double slam dunk. Okay, let's get back on track here.
Please.
So, obviously, we're talking about this statement and we're not blowing it out of proportion, but we're obviously extrapolating more out of it, more of these subtle or underlining nuances that might exist in why someone says this statement. I think most of the time when you hear like, oh, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다, like you can just kind of brush past it. It's just like something somebody says. But of course, we're extrapolating beyond it. So like we have talked about this kind of obsession with a certain look that maybe a lot of especially white Koreans will personify, right? This kind of look that people would want on top of having this exposure to another culture, preferably from the Korean point of view, a Western English speaking culture, right? And so, and having maybe this extra doorway where you could leave the Korean society if you chose to. And so those might be some aspects why someone would say like, oh, 좋겠다, or so fortunate, so lucky, right? But we also recognize the hypocrisy of that statement. And if we don't even have to go that far back. 20 years, 30 years, it didn't matter whether you were mixed white in Korean, black in Korean, whatever in Korean, you might look, Korean culture or society at that time would have still seen you as just like this outsider or representation of the fracturing of the Korean society and bloodline, or the reason why that this, or just like a physical reminder of the brokenness of the Korean country who couldn't protect their own, right?
Yeah.
When we have those two realities next to each other, one, the modern Korean society is saying, oh, beautiful, this is the look that we want, mixed race Koreans are, wow, our future, versus not so long ago, and people still alive today who remember very clearly the rejection they faced purely on the base of being mixed Korean. There's no wonder that it could feel sometimes like, oh, what do you mean by that statement? What do you really feel about it?
What do you see in the modeling industry that perpetuates this sort of, you know, 좋겠다, like comment that people would say? Like, do you feel like the modeling industry plays a part in that?
Sure. So I think, so the modeling world, just in general, of course, like you want to get somebody that catches your eye. So you want that person who's, let's say fashion modeling, especially who's tall and slim and has this face and features that really capture your eyes. Like, wow, my eye is drawn to you. And sometimes, and especially as time has developed, it's a person who has unique features. Sometimes you'll find models who have huge eyes or like really tiny, tiny little lips or big ears. I know.
Really?
Like little rosebud lips. And because those individuals, maybe mainstream isn't saying, wow, that's a beautiful person, but you can't tear your eyes away from them. There's something that captures you about this image or this look.
Yeah.
So we have this characteristic, I would say, in the fashion, model, and entertainment world. And then you come over to mixed Koreans who are not so commonly seen, particularly in the Korean society. And so then your eye goes to that person, inevitably. And sometimes if you have different genetic makeup, you might be taller than the average Korean. And so it feels almost like it was kind of natural that these people who in the mainstream would be like aliens are attracted or drawn to this industry that is glorifying these more unusual, quote unquote, exotic looks.
Right. I mean, it's exotic on one hand, but it's also like subtly familiar. Because, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, they do have Asian features, obviously, but they're different and they are eye-catching.
Yes. So you would see somebody and you would feel a little drawn to them because, wow, they look so unique or so different, and your eye is observing this because you're not familiar with that. But at the same time, they don't look so strange that you can't see yourself represented in them. And so this is kind of why it's like the golden ticket for mixed Koreans, I suppose, to be in the entertainment and media and modeling world. On one hand, we have to think those people, those trailblazers, for being able to put themselves out because they became the representation that was so long denied for mixed Koreans in Korea. So seeing somebody who looks like you or somebody who champions mixed Koreanness on the public stage, you could see that and be like, wow, I'm also mixed Korean. This is a person who is celebrated for being mixed Korean. So on one hand, yes, that is a wonderful thing. But the pitfall is when you see only mixed Koreans who are on that stage and nowhere else in society. Where are your mixed Korean politicians? Where are your mixed Korean CEOs? Where are your mixed Korean writers and lawmakers? Where are they? And there are so few to the public eye, if any, that I'm aware of almost none in Korea. And yet they're so glorified. Wow, model is beautiful. This is the look we aspire to. But when it comes to running society and when it comes to creating the backbone of what our community and future would look like, especially in education and making it a safe space for mixed Koreans and mixed homes, that is sorely lacking. And this, I think, is where the issue happens. Because now it is all about the imagery. It is all about how you look, because that is what entertainment and media and modeling pushes. Not really about the substance inside you.
Right.
So on one hand, it's like, this is so awesome. I'm so happy to see so many mixed Koreans represented. But on the other hand, it's like, but is it just a facade?
Right.
And that's why when you hear, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다, it's like, great. Maybe you really love me for how I look and what your perception of what mixed Koreans are, entertaining, good dancers, tall, models. Great, I get that. But on the other hand, like, would you want me in your courtroom? Would you want me as your lawmaker? Would you want me as your mayor? Would you want me as your CEO? I don't know.
That was very well said. And that's exactly how I feel as well. Like, I guess representation goes far beyond just being on a magazine cover or in a commercial. It's more like, where are these same people that's being represented, in the magazines and on TV? Where are they in society outside of just that industry?
Yeah.
And I think that is the point where I would like for Korea to get to, especially for half Koreans, to be able to have a little bit more representation in other aspects of society that can make a difference, that basically Korea can see the value in half Koreans besides just how they look. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot that we offer, that we can offer to society, especially not only like the half Koreans that are born here, but also half Koreans that might be from elsewhere. There's a lot of, I think, insight and a lot of things that we can add to society. But that's just my opinion. I just hope it gets to that point.
It's a matter of how willing Korean society is to cultivate those extra skills or maybe experiences or cultural influences that mixed Koreans might have here in Korea. How willing is Korea to cultivate that? Because I think it is very comfortable to try to say, okay, you're Korean now, and don't learn English or don't learn your other language in your home, and actually don't learn anything about that either, because now you're Korean. And in that case, it's like, great, you're trying to incorporate us, but at the same time denying all of those added benefits that you suddenly wanted us to bring to the society.
Right.
So that's why I think that the way education in Korea is going at the moment, something needs to expand in order to fully appreciate this upcoming generation of mixed Koreans who are growing here in Korea, on Korean soil.
It's not that obviously Korea needs to have like this open casting call for like, okay, if you're half Korean, come and serve.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know if I wish there was a way for like half Koreans, especially those that are living in Korea and that have grown up here, to feel like they're able to be a part, or to even want to be a part of, these, public servant positions or in education, and, being influential and changing how things are done and changing how people view half Koreans. If it starts in education and also like in government or, in politics, that is a starting point. And I would just like to see a little bit more representation of half Koreans there. I don't know about people like, myself who, I've only been living here a couple years. And I'm more, I'm coming from America, but this is more, I guess, for especially Koreans who have grown up here, who have lived here. I think it's more on them to be able to step into these roles and positions and hopefully affect a positive change when it comes to half Koreans.
I think it's just Korea playing catch up at this point, because Korea could have already been at this point where mixed Koreans were just part of what Korean society looked like and the fabric of that way back after the Korean War. It could have started then, but instead there was, a very concerted effort to get rid of mixed Koreans. And therefore, I think it put Korea back on what society could have looked like had we had more mixed Koreans already for many, many years. And so now we're just kind of like catching up to that. And I guess the place where it's first starting is in media and entertainment. Yeah, so we'll see what happens over the next years. So, but whenever someone says to you like, "Oh, 혼혈이라서 좋겠다," obviously you don't need to share with them this podcast.
You don't have to get all deep and like over analyzing it.
You don't have to do any of that. But we're just kind of having that conversation and unloading all of that here, just so maybe you could see a bit of what those nuances might mean and what are some things far behind what those words are actually saying. But there's that. And on the other hand, you can also just say, thanks. Oh, okay. Cool. Like maybe that person doesn't need to understand everything that you're feeling about it and just take it, meet them where they are. Okay. Thank you. And then move on with your conversation.
Yeah, that's probably the better route to take.
Yeah, instead of doing what we just did. But if you ever do need to unload that, you can always write into us at thehalfieproject@gmail.com. Do you see what I did there?
I saw what you did.
You can also leave a comment if you're listening on this YouTube channel. All right, thanks everybody for listening. And we will see you next time. We are the Halfie Project.